The very first scene of the novel, the main character, the narrator, Desmond, meets this young woman in an art gallery reception, private view, and it's so noisy that he doesn't hear a word she's saying, and he fails to admit that, and he goes on pretending he's heard. And eventually she asks him a question, and he just takes a chance and says yes, which seems to please her. He doesn't realise it, but he's committed to himself to meeting her. When I wrote that scene, I didn't know who she was, really. I didn't know what she wanted. I only knew that my hero was going to get involved in a compromising relationship with a woman because he didn't hear properly. I suppose writers are always looking at their own experience and hoping to find something which could be developed into a fictional story which would interest other people as well as themselves. You're looking for subjects which haven't been done to death already. This kind of gradual hearing loss, which is much the most common kind, but not so spectacular as, say, profound deafness, which has had books written about it. I was particularly drawn to the very near equivalence in English of the words deaf and death. In fact, it's very difficult to tell the difference between them, even if you have good hearing, without a context. And I use that near equivalence throughout the novel to suggest that deafness is itself a kind of reminder of mortality. So those were the basic ingredients of the novel. Hearing as a comic source of comedy, but not being funny for the person who's suffering it, and drawing in themes of the theme of death in all kinds of different manifestations, really, in the course of the novel. I mean, the phrase about the hair cells in the inner ear committing suicide was a rather poetic metaphor used in an article by a doctor that I read, saying this is the effect of trauma on the inner ear, trauma such as hugely loud noise, as in a nightclub, you know. She said that basically the hair cells commit suicide in your ear, and it was perfect for me, so I lifted that and put it in the novel. Yes, I think that's what writers do, they store things away. I think they often think of jokes and they decide not to tell them because they think, no, I'm going to use that in a novel. I'm not going to waste it on conversation. One of the sad things in my life about losing my hearing is I can't overhear conversations in the bus or whatever. I mean, it did happen to me once that some ex-nun was telling me her life story in a very noisy Dublin pub, and I couldn't hear it. You know, it was so frustrating, and I was rather like Desmond. It was too late to say, look, I can't hear what you're saying. I just had to pretend, and maybe I missed a wonderful story that I might have used in a novel. Well, I suppose it comes from the fact that I was an academic, a professor of literature for many years, that I like to have characters whose minds are stocked with literary quotations and literary allusions, which I think you know, thickens the texture of the novel, particularly the first-person novel. You just don't want the voice only of the narrator, you want to hear other voices, and quotation from literature is one example. How many references are there to deafness in literature by major writers? Who was deaf or suffered deafness? And just to think of that and to start looking in books gives you ideas for your story. In fact, all literature is made to some extent out of other literature, as well as out of life. He's gone through a kind of crisis, you know, in that book, in this novel, and he's reached a kind of equilibrium, and that's why I would like to leave him, really, with his motto to try and value the passing time. I don't think I'd be capable of writing a novel with a really tragic, you know, desolately despairing ending. I don't think I would want to punish my fictional characters to that extent, or make them suffer more than I have in my life, really. So, yes, I do aim at a kind of sort of serenity or something at the end. Perhaps an open-endedness, but not total negativity and despair.